Your initial post is going to have three major components. The first part is telling the story, basically the story of how we arrived at the problem you're going to be exploring. Then we're going to sit down and talk about who's who. We're going to say, hey, who assesses the facts? The triers. Who has issues? These are the stakeholders. And last but not least, we're going to talk about laws and rulings to help you understand the problem. By sharing these three things, you'll be able to share with the community what's your problem. Telling the world about the problem you want to explore is really the same as telling the story of the problem. This means you're going to have to cite and somehow organize all the facts and events into a coherent narrative. And that narrative will take the shape of, well, a narrative, or maybe a chronology or timeline, or maybe just a sequence of events in a bullet list format. The format really is up to you. However, we really need to know the story that led up to the problem you want to explore. Here's some advice to follow while telling the story. You want to open up with a clear statement of the problem and then immediately share the story after. Remember to cite four sources. You can summarize them if you want. And make sure you stick to the story. Don't jump into the analysis. Just tell the story that leads up to the problem. If you need a little inspiration or an outline, check this out to the right. You can open up with a statement of the problem. You identify the problem and the area of law that you're diving into. State the question driving the problem. Remember, exploring a problem requires a good question. Come up with a question that helps you probe that problem. Then in the story, think of it kind of like a novel, but a little drier. It is a law class after all. Think about the story in terms of relationships and triggers and fallouts, who got hurt, who benefited, stuff like that. And remember, when you tell the story and you have facts in there, cite the facts. And at the end of this, have a very short summary. So when someone reads this, they go, here's the problem, here's the driving question, this is the story that supports their exploration of the problem, and it makes sense. If your reader walks away with that sort of feeling and thoughts in their head, you've written up a good tell the story section. Remember, every problem has people. Why? Because people make problems. As people, we're really good at doing that. So look at your problem and ask yourself, who are the two major stakeholder groups I want to identify and describe? And who are the two types of triers I also want to identify and describe? And then how do I link them or relate them to the problem I want to explore? You're going to have to write this up in this section called Who's Who. The Who section is just like before. We identify two stakeholders in their unique interest, and we identify two key triers in their interest. Not a big surprise, right? Then we explain how they are related and relevant to the problem. However, writing up big long paragraphs for this can really be challenging. So you may want to consider a tabular format like we see in the outline to the right. This outline is just a suggestion, but it may help you out. For example, the stakeholder table has two columns. In first column, it lists all the stakeholders, and the second column, it lists all their unique interest. And remember, each stakeholder group has their own interest, therefore they are unique. Below that is the trier table, for lack of a better term. The first column lists out who's the trier, and then to the right, the authority of the trier. As you can see, authority differs between each kind of trier. And at the end, have a paragraph or so that explains the relevancy or relationships of these people, these stakeholders, these triers to the problem. If you follow this, I think your Who's Who section is going to be pretty straightforward. For the law and ruling section of your post, you're going to have to identify one law and one ruling and discuss how they are relevant to the problem that you want to dig into. Also, you'll need to cite and reference the law and the ruling as well. Once again, the checklist for this part isn't too surprising. You need to identify one law and one ruling and make sure they're relevant to the problem that you want to dig into. Also, you may want to have a statement ready for what kind of law you're digging into. Every problem is a little different, and since there are a variety of problems, there are different fields or disciplines of law to handle those assortment of problems. So you may want to have a sense of what kind of law is involved. And the other thing is, you want to keep your critique focused on the applicability of the law or ruling given the problem that you're digging into. Now you might be wondering how to do that. Well, let's go check out the suggested outline to figure that out. You can see it here. Here is a nice generic outline for this section. It contains two sections, an introduce section and a critique section. The introduce section basically says this is a type of law, and we're going to cite and reference it using APA formatting. Afterwards, you're going to go into the critique for the law and for the ruling that you chose, both. You're going to have to discuss the relevancy of it while solving the problem and offer a short discussion of the pros and cons of applying this law or ruling. And one thing you may want to think about while thinking about pros and cons are the stakeholders and the triers. What would they see as a beneficial outcome after applying this law or ruling? What would they see as a negative, and so forth? By thinking with their hat or stepping into their shoes, you can sit down and say, yeah, I can apply this law. It's extremely relevant. However, when I do so, these are going to be the outcomes, at least in outline. If you can do this, you'll have a very good critique of the laws and rulings that you're thinking of using to help tackle your problem. Most importantly, your project and your problem that you want to dig into is inside you. It's in your head, and we need to get it out of your head and onto paper. And using this discussion forum is a great way to start that process. So really take everything in this presentation to heart and make a solid initial post.